Welcome! Today we will show you our findings on a simulation of segregation in our hometown Delft. In everyday life there are plenty examples of segregation. Think of separation of humans into racial groups, cultural segregation, or segregation because of religion or political opinions. What is segregation? To understand how the division of individuals works, we build a model that simulates the segregation process. First, we'd like to define the important terminology for the process. When we talk about an individual's neighborhood, we say that the 8 inhabitants closest to this individual, thus its 8 direct neighbors, make up its neighborhood. We say that an individual is happy when the amount of different types of neighbors satisfies the restrictions we set in the happiness rule. The happiness rule states that a single inhabitant is happy when at least 1/3 of its neighbors are of his or her own type. After the simulation, we will analyze our results partly based upon the degree of segregation. The degree of segregation for a person is the percentage of neighbors that is of his own type. We say segregation takes place when the average degree of segregation is at least 70%. We will now introduce you to our basic model. We divided 40 people randomly on the 64 squares, while they were evenly distributed over 2 types. We applied the happiness rule like we just explained, and when a person appears to be unhappy, we try to make him or her move to the closest empty spot that will make this person happy. Let's watch an animation where we show you this process. In general, we can say that the basic model provides a city with mostly happy people and a very clear segregation taking place. Often in this model, the different types will assemble in 2 big clusters, with only very few smaller groups apart from that. The average degree of segregation, namely 70%, supports this result. Now we would like to introduce you to our special project on political segregation, where we included some variations on the basic model we observed. The Dutch politics consists of many parties, but we decided to observe the 13 biggest and divide them into 6 groups, plus a non-voters group. Here we show you the amount of votes and the different types. For this situation, we had to increase the size of the city and increase the number of inhabitants. We show you this variation on the model in an animation. We can conclude that a more crowded city results in more individuals being unhappy and also in a higher average degree of segregation, as you can clearly see in this example. In general, the grid not being a square also results in a higher average degree of segregation. Another important variation for the political situation is increasing the amount of types. In this example, we see 3 different types where the 40 individuals are not evenly distributed. However, we observe that the groups act as if they are evenly distributed. Having more types does increase the total number of moves and rounds though. The average degree of segregation does not significantly change. Last but not least, we need to look at a change in the happiness rule. You can see when we make the individuals less tolerant towards other types, that it will result in more people ending up unhappy and a more mixed end situation. Now we will introduce you to the final model. 740 individuals represent Delft's voters. We divided the 7 types as shown to you before, and the restrictions are as you can see right now. We decided to look at 2 different sizes of cities. This animation shows the process in a 29 by 29 grid. This means that there are 101 empty spaces left for the unhappy individuals to move to. We can see that in the end, the types with more restrictions and less tolerant restrictions, such as the center and right conservatives in dark blue and dark green, which include PVV and VVD, are overall very unhappy because there are very few places for them to move to. Interesting is also that 2 types with the same restrictions, D66 and the Christian Union, in light green and light blue, differ a lot in overall happiness. This is caused by the difference in size of the types. In the bigger city, a 30 by 30 grid, are 160 empty spaces to move to. It is very clear that all the types end up happier than it did in the smaller city. However, not all with the same proportion. The happiness of the smaller groups increases more. This is because of the more empty spaces, it is a lot easier for them to actually get together. The ratio in difference in the average degree of segregation for the center and right conservatives did not change a lot. On the other hand, they do have a lot more happy individuals in the end. From these observations, we can conclude 3 things. The happiness of individuals and of the different types is both significantly influenced by the size of the grid and the size of the population for a type. Also, when a type has more restrictions or very intolerant restrictions, it decreases the average of happy people and it changes the average degree of segregation. Very interesting is that although every type is influenced by the change in size of the city, they are not affected with the same proportion. These histograms show you very clearly the differences between the two cities. Thanks for your interest in our research on political segregation.